ladies and gentlemen, why don't we get started? Hello. All right, we're going to get started. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is meeting of the Board of Education. We're going to... Who is? Oh, okay. Well, that's okay because Sean is going first. Sean, oh, there you go. We're going to begin this meeting of the. I'd ask that ladies and gentlemen quiet down a bit so we can get this meeting started. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to get this meeting started, so I appreciate that. So let's all draw our attention to our first speaker, who will be Sean Nelms of East High School, our EPO at East High School. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. To my right are Dr. Steve Ewing, Project Manager for the EPO, and Tim Claskins, who supports our Finance Department. He's been working closely with the RCSD, with Everton and folks to make sure that the numbers align and that we're all on the same page.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening, Steve. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
So we have in the spirit of being brief, we have about 19 slides. So I will reference each of them, but we'll give you time to digest them at your own time.
Dr. Nelms, before you begin, I just wanted to remind my colleagues that this is not hearing for the purpose of asking questions. There is a deadline actually for us providing written questions, which would be March 18th. There is, of course, a public hearing on March 22nd, and then on March 29th at 6 o'clock, we'll actually have a deliberation on these budgets, and at that point, we can ask questions. Thank you.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
This will be a brief overview. So there are many topics that they'll be discussed within this presentation. The proposed budget overview, and budget based on our enrollment projections. We know that funding based on student projections are important in class size. Also, how funds will be used to support students who are on track and off track academically to ensure them a fair and balanced academic experience. And then some of the staffing impacts as proposed by the EPO, broken down by some of the categories within the budget. The process that we use, we looked at the needs assessed, the needs based on how our students are currently doing within the system, and some of the projected needs for the future based on ELA and math scores, as well as Regents accumulation and accomplishments. Some of the issues that we identify in the budget, some unforeseen issues from academically that we inherited, and also some things that we saw that we need to enhance in the areas of professional development. We designed the plan, and then we had a very thorough process to come up with a budget that we think is fiscally responsible and reflects the needs of the school. As we discussed last year, the EPO is based on the state diagnostic tool, where we look to strengthen ourselves in each of the categories listed on the bottom, from district leadership down to strengthening school and community partnerships. This is based on the New York State motto and was adopted by the Commissioner and the Board of Regents. The EPO plan is really heavily focused on building capacity, meaning strengthening the overall structure and design of the school, redesigning allocation and reallocation of systems, structures, and roles. You saw that in how we structure our administrative team and our teachers to provide adequate support for students in English and math, as well as providing additional opportunities for students who are off track to get back on track so they can graduate with their peers or shortly thereafter. The EPO also calls for expanded time for all students, very similar to the ELT model being used throughout the Rochester City School District, but we believe more time with concentrated structures for teaching and learning are important. And we also want to build a system where teacher leadership is a focus, because nothing can happen without the all-in support of our teachers and staff. This slide here illustrates the budget allocations that were projected for us from last year. It was 194.5 full-time equivalent teachers. We actually only used 188.25, and so we saw a cost savings there of about $1.5 million. We have tried to be as fiscally prudent as possible so that there are dollars that return back to the RCSD to be used as you so choose. This slide illustrates our enrollment projections for the following year. You will see that we would like to have 120 students projected at 6th grade, 160 at grades 7 and 8, and then we open up our slots, additional 20 slots in ninth grade, so that students who were not in our system, grades 6 through 8, have the opportunity to join us in at grade 9. And if you project this out 3 or 4 years, you will see enrollment projection of 180 for grades 9, 10, 11, and 12 as those 10th through 12th graders exit the system after graduation. The extension of school day, this slide illustrates some of the funding that the receivership dollars fund from the state to cover administrative and teacher costs for additional hours being taught. As you are aware, East has a 7.5-hour school day for students and an 8-hour school day for faculty, and so the receivership dollars at this point is used to cover the additional time spent by administrators and teachers throughout the school day. We have, in the last few months, we have spoken at probably nauseum around the 3-tiered approach for supporting students who are off track. East has a large number of students who are repeating or have not accumulated the inadequate credits or Regents exams to graduate on time, and so we have a few approaches to re-engage them and to increase the likelihood of them to graduate with their peers or shortly after. The first are compressed classes. These are typically used for students who are 16, 17, 18 with 0 credits, who've been in school over the last few years but have not earned a credit. And so compressed classes are required to get these kids caught up and get their credits more rapidly, and we are seeing some success there. East Evening School, we anticipate about 60 to 80 students next year, where again, these students have an opportunity to either catch up or get ahead. There'll be some courses offered during this time for students who want to get ahead, so they can take some college courses early on in their senior year. And then we have 2 off-site programs, East Big Picture. These are for first-time freshmen who have failed East in the past, as well as Freedom School for students who are well over age and under credit. We want to have these students prepared for the TASC or the GED program because we don't want these students to be in our communities without any type of high school equivalency. Professional development, you'll see a reduction here. The board charged us to not have a ton of consultants and to keep offering the same professional development over and over. We heard that loud and clear. And our intent is to see the professional development number dwindle, never to 0, because I think professional development is key. But we want to be strategic in what professional development we offer. This upcoming year, we will focus heavily on working with students who are in crisis and trauma, as well as culturally relevant education and some work that we're doing around there within our school. And so we are going to continue to shift and play with curriculum instruction, but also have a heavy focus on the socio-emotional aspects of schooling to make sure our teachers are able to deal with the realities of our communities and our situations. This slide, community agencies is an extremely important part of East and all of our schools in the RCSD. And this is just gives you an overview of some of the programs that we've used thus far. We are in the process of doing a full evaluation, program evaluation for each of these programs, determining how many students they touch and they support, make sure we measure their impact. And so I would not be surprised if at the end of this year, you'll see some dollars shifted among these various programs depending on their success. And so they know that we're going through, for the first time within the building, a program evaluation where we can actually measure that impact. And funds will be awarded to those who are supporting our students and helping them get through school the best. For staffing, next few slides deal with staffing. This is a proposed administrative team. You won't see any changes in this department. You are aware that we are functioning with 1 principal overseeing the entire campus. That position will be posted in the next 2 weeks. We did that to protect all schools in the city. We didn't want to hire a principal from another building or assistant principal to disrupt other schools. But we are in dire need to get a principal appointed soon. Marlene Blocker has been taking on the role of a 612 principal, and we want to make sure we post that position next 2 weeks and have someone appointed by the May board meeting, and that will make our administrative staffing whole. Some of the teaching staff adjustments you'll see here, again, for the most part, they are whole. We have some reductions in classroom teachers. Most of that will come through attrition, through retirement, or individuals who choose to leave East. We can find some efficiencies there in certain areas. with the caveat that if we hit the 120 number for students in sixth grade or higher, we may see some additional FTEs, but we're going to try to find efficiencies within there. It's a little difficult with elementary, sixth grade, because you can't have seventh grade teachers teach sixth. If it was seventh grade position, they can teach 9 or 10. So sixth grade creates a little bit of a hurdle and try to be efficient within our staffing. But we project if we hit our numbers in sixth grade, we may have some additional staffing for sixth grade positions because they're elementary certified. The support staff, you'll see in addition to one support staff, there's a clerical need for professional development and to support the various administrators who don't currently have an administrator. So this would be an administrative assistant. So this would be a shared position among those who don't have someone currently to help structure some of the work that's being done.
Just back on that slide.
Yes.
President White, just to note that although there's a 1 point in the change column, there's not, it should be where the clerk 2 is, a 1 point there in order for that to equal out.
Correct, and change. Yep, great. Thank you, Commissioner. And then the proposed support staff, you may see a slight reduction there, and these are all IEP driven, so it's kind of hard to predict exactly where those positions where the need will be, the reductions or additions. Okay, the next slide, you'll see security and maintenance and attendance and support staff. I will tell you that there has been a request for additional security, but we are not at the point right now to add additional security. We have our greater issue is the absenteeism of our security. So any given day, we may be down 1 or 2 security members, and so to add wouldn't solve that. It's to work with our security team to improve attendance so that we don't have to have these gaps. And Tim Claskins has been working with that with our lead security individuals at the building. And then there are other expenses that we project. You'll see a reduction in the EPO planning piece from the University of Rochester. That funding supports some of the Warner Center support for coaching for teachers and administrators, our support for legal, and so you'll continue to see that dwindle over the years. But we want to make sure that the Warner School and the University of Rochester continues to give back yearly as well within the proposed budget. Professional development, you'll see reduction there, as mentioned earlier, as well as translation services. We have worked closely with the communications department, Chip and his team, to be a little bit more efficient there with getting documents translated into various languages. For East, primarily English, Spanish, and Nepali. And you'll see a slight increase in the bilingual agreement, and that agreement has to do with giving teaching assistants and teachers who are certified bilingual an additional stipend as an incentive to remain at East. And that's something that we found to be extremely important, particularly in trying to find qualified individuals, certified people who speak Nepali. We have a large and growing population, so we want to be proactive in getting the staff there in our school. And then overall, budget to actual for this year, we're going to see an actual $1.6 million given back to the district based on the actual approved budget and what we actually use. So that's something that we're very proud of. We've tried to be as efficient as possible, and I think this illustrates that. As well as if you look at the proposed budget year to year, you'll see a decreases there as well. And so we will continue to be as fiscally prudent and responsible as possible, but we understand that this work requires additional staff in some of those critical areas to get our students caught up with literacy and math, as well as getting those students who are off track academically prepared to graduate with their peers. That's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nelms. Again, I indicated to my colleagues at the top of this meeting that the questions will come later.
I'm sure.
And they will, we have to provide written questions by, what was it, March 18th, right? They're due to Deborah by March 18th. And then we'll get responses to those by March 23rd. And then we'll be able to engage in direct conversations with both superintendents on March 29th at 6 p.m. Is there anything that's really pressing that needs to be said? If not, we're going to move on to the superintendent budget for this district overall. I think then Superintendent Cimusz, it's on you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy birthday, too.
Oh, thanks.
Happy birthday, we'll sing.
The best birthday gift you could give us is a balanced budget. And
say
then
that,
a
right?
higher graduation.
You had to say that.
Where are you sitting? Over there? You wanna do that? Okay, sure. That's on the way.
Good evening, everyone. Here we are, getting at the beginning of our formal presentations for the 2016-17 budget. I think you all know Lauren Pullman by now, so she's been instrumental in preparing this and making sure that we're all educated as to where we stand. So with that said, oops. Basically, we're going to just review things. What's our current status? What do we anticipate in expenditures and revenue projections? And also, even though we're not certain of where we stand right now, based on legislative action, what some of our actions would be to close the gap. Whoops, went the wrong way. Once again, you're very familiar with this, but all of our priorities are based on your action plan that has continued from the strategic plan of the board and the district. And so I think we've been mindful of that, and parents have been mindful of that as we've been moving forward. In a general sense, and at the 30,000-foot level, our current budget, the budget that you will see in front of you, it maintains programs and services at the current level with some continued support. There's probably never enough, but some continued support for receivership and priority schools. However, you will not notice anything new in this first iteration of the budget. No new programs, no major increases in any of our current activities. There are just a very slight number of staff reductions, and we will provide you with state revenue projections based on the governor's proposed budget. First, let's take a look at our student enrollment trend, which shows up through this current year where we stand both as a district and for those students who are attending charter schools within our area. What that shows over the top, over the past 16 years, our K through 12 students have decreased by about 26%. This shows a graph to show that the comparison and juxtaposition between the loss of our student enrollment and our staff enrollment, which has decreased by 8% over the same period of time. What I would like to show you to explain that a little further is this slide, which shows some of the work that you have been encouraging and funding and supporting in terms of maintaining as many counselors as we possibly can on the top line. And then you can see the increase in our ESL teachers. On the blue line, our bilingual teachers are about steady right now, and then you can see the investment on the bottom line, the green line, you can see the investment that has been made recently with getting reading specialists into our classrooms and supporting our students. So although we have not decreased our staff by 26%, this district has made an honest effort to try to maintain these services and actually increase social workers, the arts, sports, all of, instructional coaches, all of those things that support both teachers and students. This slide shows for the 2015, for the current budget, 2015-16, There were a number, and you can see them there, of planned increases that totaled about $25 million. I won't read each line to you. You can see that for yourself, but that was an investment that was made for the 2015-16 budget. Our prediction at this point is that the actual increases to support all of these investments is going to be about $25.8 million during the course of this year. So about $800,000 more than what we had, what was initially budgeted. At the same time, there were reductions that were planned for the 2015-16 budget. You can see those on the yellow arrow of about $40 million and you can see the ways in which they were planned and for what they were planned. Our best bet on the actual realization of reductions is about half that amount. One of them was you can see our special ed planned reduction. Basically, we had to add more allocated staff to account for the number of students and the number of students' IEPs and the mandated services that were required. You can see that transportation actually was a planned reduction, but we ended up increasing, and the same for our per diem substitutes. So you can see that, you can see the planned versus what we believe will be the actual reductions. During this current year, these are some of the steps that the district has taken and we are continuing to take to try to control expenditures for the remainder of the current school year. I don't need to read those to you, but basically we're looking more closely and scrutinizing the kinds of expenses that you see here. If staff is hired, there is a need. Now that does not include classroom teachers, but that includes all other positions that are scrutinized before staff hiring is approved. Travel, professional development contracts, all those kinds of things that we're looking at during this current year so that we don't overspend and in fact hopefully save funds wherever possible. So then if we move to 2016-17, I'll show you, last December you had a presentation on the budget. Neither Lauren nor I were present, but we went back and looked carefully at it, and you can see that there was a predicted budget gap of it was probably forecasted just a slightly less than that in December, but it's about $40 million. And thus far, in order to try to lower that gap, we have decided at this point in this first draft of the budget to add additional fund balance of $5 million. And you see some reduced expenses that are reflected in this first draft of the budget through the actions that you see listed. And right now, we do not have, we reduced the contingency, which I know is not one of the things that we had hoped to do, but at this point in time, that's what we've accomplished in order to lower that gap from $40 million to $24 million. So that's where we stand right now in this presentation. This is a listing of the program priorities that came from the board last November at a budget meeting, and we just thought we would show you kind of where we stand related to those. And things may change as this process evolves, but there was a recommendation for a moratorium on new programs and initiatives. Unfortunately, that is still where we're at this point. A moratorium on the expansion of expanded learning schools, that is also true at this point. The adequate funding for schools required to make demonstrable improvement to avoid independent receivership. There are some funds in the budget, and of course there are some grants as well that support the persistently struggling schools, and we have maintained the amount that are in the general funds for next year for our two-year schools. UPK, thankfully, we have been able to support that through federal funds, and we did begin a program in January. The implementation of school climate improvements, sadly, at this point, there is nothing new in the budget to support some of the things that we feel very strongly we need to include in the budget, and we hope that will change as the budget progresses, either by cutting some of our current activities to add some of those in, or hopefully by further increased state funding that would allow us to do some of that. Special education and the 2016-17 budget is funded at the level we believe that it should be, and will support all of our students' IEP needs. And also health services, as you know, we asked the legislature for $2 million to add to the health services for our nurses, and so that is part of our legislative proposal. Also, right now, we do not have what we feel to be sufficient contingency funds in the budget or unassigned fund balances. We are continuing to address the structural budget gap by looking at enrollment, by looking at staffing, by looking at all the major pieces of the budget. Transportation, we hope to do some cost savings through the recent contract and actions there. We hope to realize some savings. The efficiencies through the community schools model, we do have 4 schools, as you know, in our struggling schools that have chosen to move in that direction. At this point in time, we have included one community schools coordinator into the budget, 1 per school, because that is part of the requirement to move toward a community school model. I certainly hope we can maintain that as well. It's very important as they move forward that those schools have that. The others, the efficiencies for making families the focus of support at this point, once again, no new funding toward that. And we have looked at the final 3 there on the list. The FMP, you've been part of that. You've heard about the Smart Schools bond funding. That work continues, and in fact, in April, I believe you will see that come to forth at a board meeting for your approval. And then we have managed to restrict some of the funds for healthcare rate stabilization payouts. Right now, the major changes in revenues are, as you see, in December 2016, you saw a $16 million projection for foundation aid, which actually, in the governor's proposal, is $8 million, but you did not see the community school aid, which is the other $8 million, but just designated as community school aid, but intended for more general use than focused, just on the 4 schools that are working toward that community school model. The expense-based reimbursable aids, we did improve recovery of some CTE funds, which will help, and also the reimbursements, because we have higher transportation costs. We will get about 90% of that returned, so that will be a reimbursable aid that we'll see in 2016-17. So altogether, that's about $25 million changes in revenues to support the 2016-17 budget. The next chart, the graph, shows our increase in revenues and appropriated fund balance of $22 million. And then you can see each area of funding: food service grants, the appropriated fund balance, local share, federal share, which is basically Medicaid, the City of Rochester share, and state aid at the $25 million mark. That shows where we are right now, 15-16 to 16-17 projected. So then our major increases in expenditures are outlined here. You see the salaries and benefits, charter school tuition, cash capital, and debt service, and then a series of others that contributed to the $1 million line. And that's where we get our major increases in expenditures looking at 2016-17. There's our projected 2016-17 expenditures. Again, you see that reflection of that $46 million and the same categories. This is just simply a graphic a representation of what you just saw on the slide before. So at this point in time, some of the budget categories that we are, now that we have put together the first blush of the budget and you're seeing the first draft, we are going back and looking very carefully and reviewing all of these lines that have been across the budget. We've kind of put them all together and are now scrutinizing exactly how much money we're spending and for what purposes in all the areas that you see listed here. And once we go through that, then we may disperse those back to lines in the departments that will utilize those funds. But right now, we're just trying to put them together and take a close look at them, and that we will hopefully accomplish that before the next time that we meet on the budget, or at least partially. So therefore, here we are, our total increase in revenues at $22 million, our total increase in expenditures at $46 million, leaving us with that budget gap at this point in time of $24 million. Once again, as you know, our challenge now is to close that gap, fund priorities, and make a real honest attempt to try to fund some of the things that we feel we need to include in the 2016-17 budget that are not currently reflected in it. So in looking at closing that gap and funding our priorities, number one, our best hope is that additional increase in state aid. I think you probably know, but I'll just review that Governor Cuomo's proposal included $900 million increase statewide, and with $25 million for Rochester. Recently, the Assembly proposal has gone out with $2.1 billion statewide, and we don't know yet what the Senate, we haven't seen a Senate proposal as yet. We're hoping to see that soon, and we're hoping it matches. We would like to see it match that so that we could realize that type of increase. We have, and I know many of you have also done had combined efforts. We've testified before the Joint Finance and Education Committees. We've participated in lobby days. We've met one-on-one with our local legislators. We were scheduled to go to Albany tomorrow to meet with the Speaker, but it's been pushed back till next week, so we'll be going next week once again to try to push for more funds for Rochester. There is a consensus that there will be a significant aid increase over the governor's proposal. Our best prediction right now is that it will be between 10, for us, that will be between 10 and $20 million. We're hoping for the high side, but we're predicting it will be somewhere in that range. If it's more, that would be wonderful, but I don't know if we can count on that. And then once this agreement is reached and once we know where we stand with state aid and where the legislature is heading, we will then have to go back and relook at our projections and go over our budget again to once again see what our priorities are and how we can fund them. So other things, once again, we're currently looking at vacancies, seeing if they're essential, whether or not we need to fill them. We have a few position reductions that are in the budget book. We are looking at reducing vendor contracts, other expenses that not if we really need them, but if we can do without them, we're looking at those. That's one of those big budget items. So we brought it together and are now combing through it. And once again, for wherever possible, we'd like to shift general fund expenses to grants. There is, once again, though, we have to be careful about that because grants do end. So you can't, I know that, I've experienced that in other places where when the grant ends, then all of a sudden there's this big backlash on the general fund. So we have to be careful about that. But as we are able to, we will do that. And then finally, here's our budget development timeline, beginning with this evening. And you can see all the dates there that you are already aware of for March and April. We'll be busy with public hearings, with further deliberations, leading to May 10th, where it's anticipated you will be able to pass a balanced budget, and then finally moving over to the City Council approval in June. So once again, we thank you for all you do and your continued support of what the district needs to accomplish. And that's where we stand right now.
Unless there are any pressing issues or concerns, I want to, on behalf of the board, thank both you and Dr. Nelms for your presentations today. I got to tell you, and I think I feel confident saying this on behalf of the board, these were very succinct, they were very direct. There aren't a lot of questions even that I can think of right now. I see a couple of nodding heads. I'm really impressed with both the presentations. I'm not happy about the numbers.
Nor are we.
But it really was well done. I think for a first stab at it, excellent job, and we want to thank you. Yes. Commissioner Cruz?
I want to say something. I want to thank you and your staff. You have been absolutely open about everything that's going on. We've had some communications back and forth prior to the presentation tonight, so they've been very good about making sure that as chair of the Finance Committee, I was up to date on this stuff, and so we appreciate it. But you're absolutely right, President White. Probably one of a very succinct, very honest, no major projections that are based on some willy-nilly numbers and those kinds of things. But I think, based on what we're hearing out of Albany, I think there is some hope there.
Yes.
And hopefully that does come through, and we won't have to, get into the budget and start cutting it up. But again, thank you for your time and your energy. I know
You're
it's
welcome.
Trying to do this at the same time that you guys were coming in, which is probably the worst time to come in on a budget. But you guys have landed on your feet and have done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since we appear to be ahead of schedule, anybody else want to share any comments?
I would,
Yes,
President White.
yes, Vice President Elliott.
Just the fact that we have what we're projecting to have a $846 million budget seemingly, the community would ask the question, why can't we educate these children? We're going to, I know it happens to me, I'm going to be brutal, they're going to brutalize me in this community because we're projecting $846 million. People are saying it's close to $1 billion and we don't seem to be able to educate our kids. So I already know we're going to get, at least I am, beat up pretty bad that we are projecting $846 million. And then I didn't realize that this current budget went to the tune of $824 million because initially it was at 801. So that's the concern that we've got all this money, we're asking for more and more money, and academically we don't seem to be performing like we should. So thank you, Mr. President.
Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, well, when we talk about educating our kids, who is the we? Remember that the charter school dollars are in our budget, and the charter school percentage of our total has gone up considerably. That money passes through us. So when folks give us grief about educating our kids, we have to remind them that in that pot of money is all of the funds that finance the charter schools as well. Also, for the benefit of our TV audience, the governor's proposal didn't include one dime for health services, which the state has picked up since the county some years back refused to pay. So in my trips to Albany, we had a very favorable response to asking that the $7 million that we have been getting from the state be restored over the governor's budget, and as you indicated, Linda, we're asking for 2 million more, primarily because there are more charter schools open. That means our nurses are dispersed over a larger number of buildings, and it's just a practical necessity to making sure that our children are well served. So, you know, 7 to 9 million for school nurses, right off the bat, it's not unreasonable to expect that 10 to 20 million dollars. Another component of this would be the gap elimination. Most of the additional dollars that the Assembly, that both Assembly and we expect the Senate will restore the gap elimination and zero that out this year. That means that most of the new money will go to our suburban neighbors. But we can reasonably expect some small portion of that to come our way. We did suffer some decrease in our aid based on the gap elimination program back in under Patterson and going forward. So I think this is a very pragmatic approach. I think you've got very realistic expectations, and I thank you for that.
We're going to just keep on moving down. I know Vice President Elliott wanted to say
Yeah, I
something
just
else.
wanted to respond to Commissioner Powell about the charter school. If we recall under Dr. Vargas really stressed to us about the charter schools, that if we don't learn to educate our kids, there would be more charter schools opening. And as I looked at the data, even as of 2016-17 or 2015-16, the number of students who are in charter schools are increasing. But that's our responsibility. Somehow we haven't realized that we have to be competitive. And so for us to say, well, the charter school hasn't, well, they have it because we are not teaching our children how we're supposed to teach them. And so if we don't look at being more competitive and increasing academic performance, there are going to be more parents who are opting to send their children to charter schools. So we have an opportunity to bring this $11 million back into the city school district if we were educating our kids correctly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Commissioner Evans? No. Okay. All right. Commissioner Adams? Yep.
No, we have a lot of work to do before I'll have questions and comments.
And Commissioner Hallmark?
I look forward to further discussions after I've had a chance to look at it more. Thank you for your work.
That having been said, can I get a motion to adjourn? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Good night.
Thank you. Probably about state aid and give things right to your stuff. You know why? Because you talked to me about state aid. Sorry.
Sorry,
I'll just say it's all your fault.
I got the 22 and 25
I know.
mixed up every place it was.
Oh, hey, Justin Murphy, how are you? Good to meet you. Good.